Jahkeem Stewart gets the bag from USC, but LSU gets the haul. It's Locked on LSU. Recapping signing day. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Can LSU compete in the portal era? Got to talk about that. Coming into signing day, though, there were three players that we were keeping an eye on their decision. Jahkeem Stewart, DJ Pickett, Solomon Thomas. Oh, LSU got their haul, and we're going to talk about that in just a quick second. But let's talk about the one that got away and why he got away. And we'll start with Jahkeem Stewart because, quite honestly, we've been talking about Jahkeem Stewart literally for years. A kid who was the number one prospect in the state of Louisiana and the number one prospect in the country for the class of 2026 out of St. Aug in New Orleans, big defensive tackle. He reclassifies to 2025. LSU stayed on him. And ultimately, the decision came down for USC. And I had a conversation early Wednesday morning about how the deal shook out for Jahkeem Stewart. And ultimately, USC put together an NIL package valued at $2 million per year for Jahkeem Stewart. $2 million per year. If you're wondering, LSU got up to $1.25 million per year for Jahkeem Stewart. Now, I want to put some context on this because some people have said, well, how could you let him go for that small of a difference? Okay. First of all, over the course of 4 years, there is a big difference between the two numbers. Okay. And you can talk about state income tax in California and cost of living and all that stuff. And you're not wrong. I just don't feel like having that conversation. Ultimately, USC paid more than LSU did. But I'm glad LSU made the decision they did. I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to say the same thing that I said to you about Bryce Underwood. I'm going to say it here about Jahkeem Stewart. The same thing I said to you about Cade Phillips. I'm going to say it about Jahkeem Stewart. And I hope LSU continues to operate in this manner for as long as this is the way things are done. Two things can be true at the same time. You can want Jahkeem Stewart, but you can also recognize that paying $2 million for a guy that next year, when he's a freshman at USC, will be playing what should be his senior year in high school. Oh, by the way, a guy that played a total of 10 high school football games. Listen, if we're talking about sealing what Jahkeem Stewart will one day likely be because of his size, his physicality, his measurables, all athleticism, all that stuff, absolutely. Do you want Jahkeem Stewart? You are darn right you want Jahkeem Stewart. But in a revenue share era where you have a capped amount of money to spend in revenue share, are you willing to commit $2 million, literally four times the amount you paid Will Campbell last year, 4 times that amount for a 17-year-old early enrollee who's played 10 career high school football games? At some point, fiscal responsibility has to take over. If you bought Bitcoin in 2013 and money didn't matter, okay. If you're the owner of Oracle and because your wife is a Michigan fan and wants to go drop $12 million on Bryce Underwood because it doesn't matter because you're worth $250 billion, okay, no biggie. But for the rest of the world that actually has to operate within a budget, yeah, listen. LSU's not poor, y'all. That's one of the things I keep hearing from people. Man, LSU can't compete. You signed DJ Pickett, the number one corner in the country. You signed Harlan Berry, the number one running back in the country. You flipped Solomon Thomas from Florida State, one of the top 2 5-star offensive linemen in the country. Like, you had a $1.5 million offer for Bryce Underwood, $1.25 million for Jahkeem Stewart. Don't tell me you got money. You got money. You're one of the haves. But you also have to recognize what makes sense. If you're starting a restaurant and you're trying to break even, invest your money in staff and ingredients and marketing, not in a state-of-the-art kitchen appliances. If you're a family, even a well-to-do family, a middle-class, upper-middle-class family with 3 kids in private school, but even though you make good money, you're living on a budget, you're going on family vacation, you're not all flying first class and staying at a 5-star resort. Fly coach and stay at a really nice hotel. Fiscal responsibility isn't about depriving yourself of nice things. It's about avoiding excess that puts you in fiscal danger. That's what you'd be talking about here. So 2 things can be true. Number 1, yes, you wanted Jahkeem Stewart. Number 2, paying $2 million don't make a lick of sense. And also, you can take that money and then you can allocate that money to the transfer portal, which is something I do want to talk about. Now, Brian Kelly met with reporters, and this was probably the best way to say it. You can hear me say it, but Brian Kelly gave an example using Tyler Miller, who signed with LSU. But a better example is if you were to replace Tyler Miller's name with the offensive lineman from North Louisiana that flipped to Ole Miss last week. But this is the example Brian Kelly gave of how, in this revenue share world, this works.
Where we see Tyler Miller, relative to revenue sharing, another school might see him much higher because they value him 20%, 30%, 40% more because they need him more. And so their number comes in at X. It doesn't mean we devalued him, but we've got 3 other tackles in our program. And so that's where the rub comes, right? That's where this comes of, well, so-and-so's offering us X, and you're only offering us Y. Well, it has nothing to do with your value. It's just the other program doesn't have a tackle, and they desperately need you as their cornerstone. And so they're going to spend more money. So it's not your market value. It's what they need. And that's where this becomes really, really difficult. Anybody that we've lost in the last few days, it wasn't because we didn't offer money. It wasn't because we didn't recruit them. It was because the value that was meant to them was exponentially more. It wasn't market value. It was exponentially more because it meant they needed that piece. And they were going to do whatever was necessary to get that piece.
USC desperately needed good news, so they overspent for Jahkeem Stewart. Texas overspent for Cade Phillips. It's just the way it went. LSU remained fiscally responsible. And it's not just LSU. Look, Alabama flipped Derek Meadows out of the LSU class. And this isn't me sitting here today poo-pooing it because Bama flipped Derek Meadows. Go watch any of our episodes over the last month when we've talked about Derek Meadows. I've told you the same thing. Derek Meadows is a guy that LSU got committed. They gave him an NIL offer. He kept pushing for more money. They said, we're paying, this is our number. Alabama had a 5-star wide receiver, Caleb Cunningham, flip out of their class to Ole Miss. They were desperate for a receiver, so they went and overpaid for Derek Meadows. Okay, cheers. Whatever. If LSU felt that desperately that they needed Derek Meadows, they would have gone up. Didn't feel that way. Bama needed a receiver. They got him. The same thing happened to Alabama. There were 2 players a couple weeks ago that flipped from Bama to Nebraska. Guys that were in the middle of Alabama's class. Nebraska overpaid for them because they had a desperate need, and guys took more money. That's what Jahkeem Stewart did. That's what Cade Phillips did. That's what Bryce Underwood did. But in spite of all that, LSU still pulled in a monster class. And let's not lose sight of that. We're going to talk about it next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Really cool to be able to tell you about our new partner here on Locked on LSU. It's Bettor Together. If you hate the team you drafted in a season-long fantasy, but you want to stay in the action, introducing Bettor Together. Bettor, Bettor Together. It's the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent. And you can play with your friends, not against them. All you got to do is you pick more or less on real-time player stats. You can strategize with your partner to boost your odds. You can climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend, join the social daily fantasy movement at Bettor Together. Download Bettor Together, Bettor. Download Bettor Together now from the App Store and sign up using the promo code Locked On. One word for a free $10 entry into the NCAA football or NFL contest. Play with me in the Locked On CFB Saturday Games contest this Saturday. Remember the code Locked On because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. So one of the things that I always want to be mindful of, and it's so easy. And it happens, it's symptomatic of almost every single fan base. And this isn't a criticism. It's just, I think, just sort of human nature and how it associates with recruiting. Fan bases typically focus on the prospects they don't get, the ones that got away, instead of hyper-focusing on who you did get. Because you go through this years-long recruiting process and you convince yourself, not you, just the universal you, that this player is going to be part of your program. And then when it doesn't happen, you become disappointed. And quite honestly, so much of that is just a recruiting rankings flex. Like I look at LSU's class, and in the on-3 composite, LSU class is ranked right now in the composite is ranked 8th overall in the country. You have a consensus top 10 class. And I understand that everybody wants to be number one, but here's my question. Did you get great players and did you fill needs? Y'all, we talked for months about DJ Pickett. How much of a must he was. Not a want, not a need, a must. Your secondary has been awful. Your secondary cost you an opportunity at a national championship 2 years ago with Jaden Daniels. Your secondary this year had some improvement, but your safety play was bad. And you had Zy Alexander and Ashton Stamps at corner, but make no mistake. DJ Pickett steps on campus day one and is a starter anywhere in college football. If DJ Pickett were playing for LSU this year, he would have been a starter for LSU this year. So when you were up against it and you had to fight off Miami and you had to fight off Oregon, two big spenders late, and you got DJ Pickett in your class, that is a massive win. There were 3 players we were keeping an eye on signing day. Jahkeem Stewart, DJ Pickett, and the other was Solomon Thomas. Solomon Thomas, 5-star offensive lineman. Do you realize, for all the complaining LSU fans are doing, you flipped. You signed the number 1 cornerback, the number 1 running back, and you flipped a 5-star offensive lineman from Florida State on signing day. It's so easy to focus on what got away, but if you take a second and refocus on what you got, not only did you get those 3 5-stars, you went and got the number 1 player out of the state of Arkansas in Carius Kern, who Brian Kelly said is physically ready to play in the SEC today. You got a top 100 player in linebacker Charles Ross out of Texas. You went into Houston and got Charles Ross, a top 100 player, right from under the Longhorns and the Aggies. Jaden Breaker, you went into Georgia and got a top 130 player. I mean, 24/7 ranks him as the 11th best linebacker in America. He's the consensus number 10 linebacker in the country Damian Shanklin, a top 150 player, freakish edge out of Indiana. JT Lindsay, a running back out of Alexandria, number 147 nationally. We just heard Brian Kelly talk about Tyler Miller, the top offensive lineman in the state of Mississippi. You went into Mississippi and plucked him away from Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Aiden Anding, 4-star, number 1 defensive back in the state of Louisiana. Teron Francis, 4-star, number 1 receiver in the state of Louisiana. You loaded up this class. What needs did you fill? What type of talent did you get? It's an outstanding class, and Brian Kelly said as much when he met with reporters after the ink was dry.
This is an outstanding class. Would we have wanted all of the guys? Yeah, we fought hard for all those guys. But I think I laid a pretty good message out to what this recruiting is all about. And those two guys loved LSU. They didn't have much of a choice. And so we're out there fighting and recruiting and putting together a great class, and all these kids wanted to be here. They wanted to be part of LSU because they see something, they felt something that was clear to them. And what was clear to them, that this is going to be a championship program, and they want to be part of it. So the message is really clear. In back-to-back years, we've been able to put together elite classes. And we feel like the student athletes know that. They talk to each other. They sense that. And so our fans need to know that. And what finishes it off is that we need to get continued support from our donor base so we can now continue to augment the roster through the transfer portal, which is the other way of building your roster now in this new world that we live in. If we do that, the glass is certainly half full.
So how do you do that? That's the next component, and that's what I want to talk about. Because LSU, with this signing class, has done an incredible job of supplementing and doing exactly what Brian Kelly said he wanted to do, which is build your roster, build your numbers through the high school ranks, and then supplement through the transfer portal. And I had someone ask me earlier today about LSU and the lack of the hit rate in the transfer portal. Oh, no. LSU has hit on more players in the portal than it's missed on. What you haven't done and what you didn't do this year was get huge impact guys. You got contributors. But how do you go get huge impact guys in the transfer portal? How does that plan and path lay out to supplement this 2025 roster? That's what we'll talk about as we wrap up Locked On LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Brian Kelly was asked about how this team can contribute or can compete, if they can compete with the heavy hitters in the transfer portal. Want to set this up properly. I've consistently said, and if you missed our past few episodes about building the roster and building the roster without Underwood and primer for signing day, I've mentioned 3 ways. And Brian Kelly's mentioned them as well. 3 ways that you're going to build your roster in 2025. Number 1 is your returning players. That's number 1. Can you get back Garrett Nussmeier, Mason Taylor, Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, Go down the list of these veteran players you hope to get back. Jacoby and Guillory's coming back. West Weeks is coming back. All these veteran players that have been impact guys for you. That's number one. Number two was finish off a great 2025 signing class of freshmen, which you did. 23 signees, 3 5-stars, may end up with 4 5-stars if Karius Kern ends up as a 5-star and on 3, which many believe that he will before this is all done. That's number two. Number three is the transfer portal. So Brian Kelly was asked point blank, how do you compete in the portal? Now, before I let you hear what Brian Kelly said, I want to remind you, when LSU, this is the part that I think is still confusing for some, is the difference with NIL and revenue share. Remember, revenue share is not NIL. I'll use LSU. LSU last year generated $200 million in revenue. Under revenue share, up to $20.5 million of that amount will go to student athletes, will be distributed and shared with student athletes. Now, not all $20.5 million goes to football. It'll be allocated. Let's say a percentage to football and a percentage to basketball and women's basketball and baseball and softball and so on. And of course, football is going to get the biggest chunk of the pie. So you have that money. And of that 20.5, let's say Brian Kelly actually in the press conference threw out a ballpark number, said, let's say it's 13 million, 13.5. Okay, so let's say $13 million. Well, now you have $13 million to spend on your entire roster for the 2025 season. And I've explained this to you before, but you've got that amount of money to spend on your whole roster, and it's broken down by position group. What percentage of the revenue will you allocate to quarterback and to offensive line and to receiver and to tackle and defensive tackler? And you understand. And then you break it down player by player within that group with the money that's allocated. And LSU's been working on that for 2 years now. So when you had $1.25 million allocated for Jahkeem Stewart, that money's free now. It's available, I mean. You had $1.5 million for Bryce Underwood. That money's available now. You had $800,000 for Cade Phillips. That money is available now. On top of money you had already budgeted for the portal. Before you lost those guys, Brian Kelly was telling you they were going to be aggressive in the portal. So LSU already had money budgeted for the portal. And then you free up $1.5 million and $1.25 million. That's $2.75 million. And then the $800K from Cade Phillips. I don't math real good, but that's about $3.5 million of extra funds you just freed up to go spend in the transfer portal. So you should be aggressive in the portal. The 3 ways you're going to build it: get your guys to return, sign a really good 2025 class, go be aggressive in the portal. Well, now you can be even more aggressive because you made the decision not to overpay for the young guys, and in so doing, you freed up capital to go be even more aggressive in the portal. Brian Kelly was asked point blank, can you compete in the portal with the Oregons and the Michigans and the Miamis and these schools that are spending freely?
Now, it's no longer about just your brand. Your brand has to be backed up with the ability to supplement that with dollars, because that's what we're in. And so if you want to get into the portal, if you want to be able to close some of these, you have to have active participation from a donor base. And it can't just be 1 or 2 guys. It has to be from all those that want to see the Notre Dames or the Ohio States or the Oregons or the Alabamas do well. They have to be involved. And so that means the LSUs. If they want to be at the top of the food chain, then we have to be involved as well. And that's just the reality of where we are today. And whether we like it or not, it's where it is today.
Bottom line is LSU has to do it with numbers. This is the punchline. LSU doesn't have a deep roster of billionaire donors like Texas, like SMU or Michigan. There are 3 billionaires in the state of Louisiana. Todd Graves, who is very generous to LSU. Bill Goldring, owner of the Sazerac Company, lives in New Orleans, is not an LSU alum, doesn't donate to LSU. And Gail Benson, the owner of the Saints, also not donating to LSU athletics. So I had someone who is a friend of mine who loves LSU, let's say who's been associated with the NFL for a long time. Not a coach. Say to me, LSU needs to approach this. The fan base needs to look at this like they're the Green Bay Packers. And it was interesting. I was like, what do you mean? And he explained, the Packers don't have an owner, a singular owner. They have a chairman of the board that acts as like the general manager and runs the team. But the people own the team. Your people own certificates, they own shares of the team. And explain that's the way LSU fans have to approach it. It's not going to be this handful of billionaires that fund everything. It's going to be the average fan taking ownership of the team and having thousands and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of LSU fans give hundreds and thousands of dollars and building your coffers that way. It's an interesting concept. And I think LSU, especially since the Tiger Athletic Foundation took over fundraising for Bayou Traditions, the collective, they've done an outstanding job to the point where LSU's raising 7 figures a month now for the collective since the Tiger Athletic Foundation got involved. They've done a much better job engaging the $10,000, $20,000, $100,000 donor. But you have to go even lower in scale, higher in scale in numbers, but lower in scale in dollar value. You've got to be able to appeal to the $500,000 donor and get those in the tens or hundreds of thousands. And that, like the Green Bay Packers. And that's going to be the way, ultimately, that LSU can build its collective to sustain. But I want to say it again. LSU's not the richest, but they're far from the poorest. I'll remind you, you had a $1.5 million offer on the table for an 18-year-old quarterback that's never taken a snap. You had a $1.25 million offer on the table for a 17-year-old defensive lineman that's played 10 high school football games. LSU's not poor. They're far from the bottom. And they got a massive haul on signing day. So when you step back and take the 10,000-foot view, so often it's easy to hyper-focus on what you didn't get instead of looking at what you did. And if you reframe to look at what you did get, LSU got a big haul, including the number 1 cornerback who you desperately wanted, the number 1 running back in the country. You flipped a 5-star offensive lineman from Florida State on signing day, and you got a consensus top 10 class. It's exactly what you needed. And now, with bags of cash, you go be aggressive in the portal. You're going to hear me say this over and over again. Check with me in a month. Check with me in a month. LSU now flush with cash. Go be aggressive in the portal and see what you land. If on a month from now, when that portal window closes and LSU hasn't landed a massive portal haul, then it's time to panic. But until that moment, let's see how it plays out. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. Hey, if you are on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.